Welcome to the Connor's Corner segment of Ask the Lawyer. The other night I was watching Twin Peaks, and all of a sudden a very familiar face popped up on the screen. Our next guest, Don Murry. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very well, particularly well, because I'm enjoying watching the series of David Lynch of Twin Peaks, because when you agree to do the show with him, you only see your scenes. You don't get to see the rest of the scenes, so you don't really know what it's about. And all the revelations and the interesting turns that the story takes are all surprises to me, and I'm delighted with it.
Okay, now some of the younger people in the audience may not remember you, but you were the title character in The Hoodlum Priest. You were the hero of From Hell to Texas, directed by Henry Hathaway. In a lot of people's minds, they remember you from Bus Stop because you co-starred with Marilyn Monroe.
That's right. That's what most people remember these days. And I'm pleased with that because I was very happy with the picture, and I thought she was wonderful in it. As a matter of fact, I thought that she should have gotten the Academy Award, but she wasn't even nominated. As a matter of fact, Marilyn was never nominated for an award or was never given any special recognition by the Academy, which is a shame because I think she deserved it.
Now, a lot of times you read in different articles or whatever, she was a very difficult person to work with. How did you find her?
Well, she was difficult to work with because she did come in late every day. It's an amazing thing because there's nobody that was better in front of a camera than Marilyn Monroe, but she was totally terrified of being in front of the camera. As a matter of fact, she'd come on the set with skin that looked like a baby skin, completely clear and lines and just pure, wonderful white skin, and she'd walk in front of the camera and having to start rolling, she'd break out in a rash because she was so nervous. It was a very strange dichotomy.
You were thinking about writing a book about your relationship with Marilyn Monroe in the movie. Did that book get finished?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it's much more than just my relationship with Marilyn Monroe. It's a decade of what is happening in her life and at the same time as what is happening in mine. And I go back and forth between the two lives until we meet, and then the part of the book is about us together, which is the largest part of the book, and then is what happened previously from the time we finished Bus Stop and until her death, which came 6 years later.
I know this is a stupid question, an obvious question. What was your reaction when you heard about her death?
Well, I was just total shock. It happened on the day I was married, as a matter of fact, in Berlin to my wife, Betty Johnson, the model Betty Johnson, who is now Betty Murry, of course. And that was a real shock to me, and I was very surprised because I didn't know, because she was didn't have any signs of this when we were doing Bus Stop, but I didn't know about her drinking or her heavy pill taking, so that came as a shock to me.
What is your book about? Because you touched upon it briefly about before Bus Stop, after Bus Stop, but give the audience an idea.
Well, the most important thing that it's about is that during the Korean War, I served in a group called Brethren Service, which is one of the three historic peace churches. So for 2.5 years, I was in Germany doing two things, helping as a laborer build the headquarters for our relief activities there. So I got the idea of building a refugee-free community, and I joined with an American social worker named Belden Paulson, and we found land on the island of Sardinia that was very fertile land and was in an underpopulated part of Italy, which was the only underpopulated part of Italy. And we bought land there. I put up the down payment with my wife at the time, of Hope Lang, the actress. And with Belden Paulson, we developed a refugee free community with the United Nations finally lauded as the only a refugee integration program that ever worked, and they went and hired Belden, my partner, as a special representative to expand the project and use it for settling the rest of the refugees that were living in barbed water camps. And that was a project called HELP, the Homeless European Land Program, and that was organized in 1957 and became self-supporting in 1968 and became the example, the principal example for the Peace Corps.
Speaking about Germany, you did a very interesting film back in the 60s about an escape from East Berlin. Can you tell us a little bit about that movie?
Yeah, that was a movie based on a real event. The first 28 people that escaped from East Berlin by digging under the infamous Berlin Wall. They tunneled under it. And so that was the movie. It was it had two titles. One is Tunnel 28, and the other was Escape from East Berlin.
Did you meet any of the people, the real-life characters that you portrayed or your co-stars portrayed?
Yes, we did meet them. Mm-hmm. Yes, and they were technical consultants on the film.
Okay, and the determination or the ingenuity of those people, it's amazing.
Yeah, that was very courageous, too, because they would have been all put in prison if they had been caught.
You know, I was in West Germany in the service during the 70s, and every once in a while, and it wasn't that uncommon, somebody would be shot trying to cross over from East Germany into West Germany. It wasn't an unusual circumstance.
No, that's true. Then you were there in the military at the time. I was there as service and brethren service, because that's exactly when I was there.
Another thing we didn't get to talk about last time, but you were in a very interesting TV series, which today may seem very common to some extent, but it was about two bounty hunters of different races, which back then was unusual.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, at that time, ABC, I had never done a series, and ABC wanted me to do a series, so they gave me a choice of three different series, and whichever one I chose, they would put on the air for an entire year without doing a pilot, just 28 segments an entire year. And I chose The Outcast because it was the opportunity for black kids to have a cowboy hero, a cowboy who was the hero of the piece, not just playing a secondary role, because black actors had played secondary roles in westerns, but were never the hero, equal to the white role. So The Outcast was the story of a former slave, played by Otis Young, a wonderful actor, and American slave or Southern slave owner, played by me, and that was a real joy to do. I'm sorry it only lasted for 1 year.
You're listening to Ask the Lawyer with me, Mike Connors. Our guest right now is Don Murry. Welcome back to the Connors Corner segment of Ask the Lawyer. With me right now is Don Murry, who we just mentioned was on Twin Peaks a couple of weeks ago. And, you know, he was a star of many important films, especially in the 60s and 70s. The Hoodlum Priest, Advise and Consent. Now, Advise and Consent, that was a great cast.
It really was, and it was a wonderful screenplay by a man named Hayes. I think it's Richard Hayes, his name was. And a wonderful direction by Otto Preminger.
And that was one of the last films of Charles Laughton, if it wasn't his last film?
Yes, it was, yeah. And as a matter of fact, Franchitone died, I think, just about a week after the film was finished. So that was his last film.
Now, you played a troubled character in that, and today I don't know if people would understand the film.
The trouble of the character is that he had while he was lonely in the Pacific Ocean, he had a homosexual affair, and then he went on to live a normal heterosexual life, but when some people in Congress wanted to force him to agree to support their candidate for Secretary of State, they blackmailed him for that homosexual relationship, and he ended up committing suicide. So it was a very, very, very sad, tragic story, but it was a wonderful presentation of how democracy works. It was just a splendid film, I think.
You worked with a lot of traditional Hollywood directors, so to speak, and now you're working with David Lynch. What's the difference?
Well, number one is with David Lynch, you don't get the script, so you don't know what kind of a movie you're in, because you only get the scenes that you're in. And interestingly enough, David Lynch is the only producer-director who I never met before I walked on the set to act for him. I had never spoken to David Lynch, and he didn't ask to see me before he hired me. He just hired me. I could have walked in with a little nose, what I call little wires in my nose and pulling a tank of air from me. I could be a decrepit person that he hired. So that was amazing. I think it was because of the casting director, Joanna Ray, that I was really cast in that, because I knew her and she knew my work. And I think when she mentioned me to David, and David said, "Oh yeah, he could play Mullins," which kind of startled me because it's a very large role.
Now, going back on your career, if a young person asked you what film, what show would best represent the work of Don Murry, what would it be?
Well, there would be two, actually. It would be Bus Stop, because it was directed by Josh Logan, and great director, and that was with Marilyn Monroe. But also my own production of The Hoodlum Priest, which I wrote and produced and starred in. Those two were the most important pictures, and I think the best pictures I was ever involved with, both of them.
Now, The Hoodlum Priest was critically acclaimed at the time.
Yes, it was.
And you played a Jesuit priest, and tell the audience what the story was behind the...
Well, he was called the Hoodlum Priest because he worked with ex-convicts and trying to get them work and a place to live, to keep them from going back to jail again. And his concept was to build a halfway house where they can live and be fed and housed until they got themselves on the feet with a normal job, and they could go out on their own. So he had a real struggle to do that, and he also had a struggle in trying to convince the authorities that he wasn't a hoodlum himself, that he was just working with these hoodlums to keep them away from crime. So it was chosen by the National Board of Review as the number 4 film of the year, and it won 5 international Best Awards, 4 awards for Best Movie, and 1 award for Best Actor, which was shared by Keir Delay and myself.
Of course, that was a powerful statement against the death penalty or capital punishment at the time.
Yes, it was.
Because it's a lot easier to do it in a film where you have real people, where you're showing real people, than just an abstraction.
Yes, and events that actually happened rather than fiction.
Are you doing any other projects right now?
Well, as I said, I finally have my book, which is not just an actor's story, because the main thing of it is the development of the Peace Corps, which actually, as it developed, it was an accident in a way, because I had been with Marilyn and Bus Stop. The Democratic Party asked me to come to Hibbing, Minnesota in November, right before the election, and introduce Senator Kefauver, who was a vice presidential candidate for the Democrats. And Kefauver's plane was late, so they asked me to make an extemporaneous speech. and the speech had to be half an hour long, and they wanted a speech about Hollywood. Well, I didn't even live in Hollywood. I just made the one film with Marilyn, and I went right back to my home in New York. So I couldn't talk for 10 minutes about Hollywood. So instead, I told him about Brother in Service and my work with the refugees and the barbed wire camps, and my desire to get those people out of the camps. And Humphrey heard of that, and he said to me afterwards, I want to learn more about this because I'd like it to get the government behind the altruistic zeal of young people like yourself. And he worked on that for 5 years. He named it the Peace Corps, but as I said, he was not able to get it through Congress. And then during his campaign against Kennedy for the presidency, as a matter of fact, Kennedy took over the idea and spoke about creating a Peace Corps, and later he established it, as I say, by presidential decree. So it was Humphrey's baby, his idea, but it was finally put through by Kennedy.
I'm going to ask one last question because we have some fans of James Cagney out there. What was it like to work with James Cagney and shake hands with the devil?
Well, it was a real kick because Cagney had been a real film hero of mine, not for his gangster films, but for the Fighting 69th, where he played a soldier in the 69th Regiment of New York. He played in World War I, and as a matter of fact, my uncle was a member of the Fighting 69th, so I always in World War I. So I always connected to Cagney, and here I was playing with him, co-starring with him, and that was a real thrill. He was always embarrassed by his gangster films. The only film he really liked of his, up until Shake Hands with the Devil, was Yankee Doodle Dandy, the one that the story of George M. Cohan, the musical story, and where he played Cohen and did his dancing like Cohen. And that was the one film that he was really proud of. And I think that was his best film. So that was it. I worked with him in Shake Hands with the Devil. And another nice thing that happened with Shake Hands with the Devil is I was doing right after that, I was doing The Hasty Heart as a television movie. And I convinced them to bring Richard Harris over for a part, sight unseen, without ever seeing him. And I convinced them by telling them that to bring him over, and if they don't cast him, I'll reimburse them for his airfare. And I brought him over, and they absolutely just loved him. And as soon as he auditioned for them, he got the role, without question, and they thanked me for bringing him over.
Hopefully we'll get this book out about you and Marilyn. Anything else we should be looking for you?
Let's see. Yeah, there's going to be something interesting coming out too. Is my son Michael wrote a book called Salvage, which is based on his own experience diving for the largest ship ever sunk off on the Spanish Main off the coast of Ecuador, and that dive story that's going to be coming out soon, and I helped him with the editing of that, just like he helped me with the editing of my book. So I think these two events will be really interesting events for our family and for the public, I think.
Don Murry, thank you for being on our show. Good luck to you. We enjoyed you in the past, and now we're enjoying you in the present.
Well, I really appreciate that, Mike. I've enjoyed talking to you before, and you do an interesting show, and I'm happy to be part of it.
Thank you again.